My name is Latonya. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. This series is something that I've been thinking about for a while. We actually had one episode in December where we talked about depression, if you want to go back and look at that. But this is something that's going to happen every Monday. It's going to be, it's going to evolve, I'm sure, over time. We're going to talk about various types of mental health issues from depression, anxiety, substance abuse, trauma. And we're going to talk from it from the perspective of real life. Even though I'm a registered nurse, anything I say is just for educational purposes, right? Um, and if you think you need to see a physician, that's what you need to do, or a healthcare provider. That's what you need to do. But hopefully, through discussion and information we provide on this series, and I say we because I'm going to have two co-hosts that will be with me on a regular basis on this series, that you will maybe have some self-awareness or some awareness of someone in your life, and you'll know better how to help yourself and help others. Okay, so this is meant to be kind of more of a discussion type format, although there is going to be, me delivering a little bit of education, because not everybody's coming from that same knowledge base as far as mental health is concerned. So I want to make sure when we're saying things that everybody is on the same page and everybody knows what we're talking about. Okay. So first off, this is being sponsored by Always Up Coaching. That is my life coaching firm. We give everybody a free hour of life coaching. If you don't know what life coaching is, just make your free appointment and you will find out, and you won't be disappointed. Okay. Go to www.alwaysupcoaching.com, click book a free discovery appointment, and make an appointment. And me and you will get together, and we'll have a very interesting, fascinating, and fulfilling hour. Okay. I am going to string that information along the bottom, so no rush to write it down. It's going to be up for the whole hour. Also, the majority of you that might be watching this are probably watching from my personal page. I recently had an influx of followers over the last few months, so there's over 13,000 of y'all. And welcome. Thank you for coming. But on my page, I post a hodgepodge of stuff, and I will not routinely post this series on my personal page. It will be going on my coaching page and the coaching business page, Always Up Coaching. So I will put the links in the comments. But if you look up at Always Up Coaching on Facebook, you will find the business page where you can follow that. That way you will be sure in the future not to miss an episode. Or on that page, you'll see a link to the coaching page. So you'll know the difference between my page and the coaching page, because my coaching page avatar has AUPC at the bottom of it. So you'll know you're in the right place. So make sure you follow those. And also, in celebration of over 13,000 followers, we're having a 10K giveaway. And I am giving away $100 in cash. And that contest will start tomorrow. In addition to the cash, I'm going to have some runner-ups who are going to be receiving a free journal that they can use as a planner or just as a journal to write. Let me adjust this a little bit, y'all. So that starts tomorrow. So be sure to visit one of the coaching pages, either Always Up Coaching or Latonya Brumfield AUPC tomorrow, and click on the entry form so you'll be entered to win $100 cash. Okay. And I'm going to, as soon as we draw, I'm going to send it to you via Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, whatever your choice is. Okay. And I'd be happy to send to you a journal as well. If you're one of the runner-up people, I have 180 page hardbound dot notebook. And as y'all get to know me, I'm going to always talk about planning and journaling, because at the very heart of personal development, which is one of my expertise in coaching, is managing your time appropriately and writing things down, just writing things down, feelings, plans, thoughts, visions. Okay. So I would love for several of y'all to have a notebook. I actually have, I think, 8 of them that I purchased to give away. So there's going to be many winners in this 10K giveaway. So The only thing you're going to have to do is fill out that form and follow me on all of my socials. So if you want to get a head start after you watch this, go straight on over to Always Up Coaching and follow our pages. So today's topic for Mental Health Monday is anxiety. Now, anxiety is something that is, I feel, overused in these days and times, especially in the context of people needing medicine for anxiety, right? Um, modern life puts a lot of pressure on everybody, and I feel like there's a run for a quick fix. We know that's kind of how we are now. We live in a society in which we want to fix things very fast. We have a lot of knowledge about things that can't fix things. So, the default is, maybe go to the doctor and get a medicine. Now, some people need that. However, some people don't. And so for a few minutes, I'm going to talk about the difference between um, anxiety as a clinical diagnosis and anxiety as just an emotion, right? We all will be anxious. Anxiety is a normal feeling to feel or experience. So, anxiety is something that I've had experience with. And to be honest, I didn't know what anxiety was until not even early adulthood, but mid adulthood, to really be able to define in myself when I felt anxious. But clinical anxiety, and I'm going to pull up my notes. Clinical anxiety is something that goes a little deeper than just feeling anxious, okay? And, if you're experiencing these symptoms when it comes to clinical anxiety, you do need to see a healthcare provider and get help because it can be very detrimental to your quality of life and not only your mental health, but your physical health. So, I'm scrolling through my notes, y'all. So when you have a clinical anxiety, what you're going to be looking at is intensity. It's going to be an intense level of anxiety that goes beyond the regular, okay? And then you're talking about duration too. Often we have small moments of anxiety that wax and wane. For example, you're running late for work in the morning and you're just very anxious, right? Um, Obviously, that's situational. A lot of the anxiety that happens under normal circumstances is situational. Something's going on that's creating anxiety. But the difference in clinical anxiety is it persists beyond the scope of a situation, and it's chronic, and it endures. The duration is longer. Sometimes people with clinical anxiety has symptoms like excessive worry. They start having panic attacks, which panic disorder is something completely different. And I'm going to touch on that just a sec. And they avoid certain tasks for fear of being anxious. They can also have physical symptoms such as sweating, shaking, and a racing heart. Sometimes that can reach the level of what we know or call a panic attack. Also, the symptoms of anxiety will cause a person extreme distress beyond the norm. Um, Also, you cannot get a diagnosis of anxiety if there's other conditions that you have, what we might call comorbid conditions, other diagnoses that may be causing your symptoms as well. So we have to make sure we're clear that it is an anxiety disorder. So if it's affecting your lifestyle, it's persistent, um, it's causing other emotions within you, you need to see a healthcare provider. When do you need to see a healthcare provider? Anytime you think you need to see a healthcare provider or if your symptoms are severe. That being said, the focus of today's conversation will be the things you can do in absence of a healthcare provider, i.e., um, therapy, as far as with a mental health professional, or um, having a care provider prescribe a medication to help you. What are some of the other things you can do? And this discussion will not end today. We'll have other discussions about anxiety. So this is not the end all be all discussion on anxiety. There will be other times in which we actually will discuss anxiety in different facets of it. So let me tell y'all a little bit about how I realized that I had clinical anxiety. I always knew I was anxious, and in my late 30s, I figured out that I had ADHD. And how I figured it out is kind of another complex story of life situations. But the minute I realized I had it, I knew it was a thing. I knew I actually had it. So I didn't realize I had clinical level anxiety until I actually saw a provider who diagnosed me with ADHD officially, and who actually at the same time diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder. And so when you talk about anxiety, I said anxiety can come from situational factors. Usually the non-clinical anxiety is more related to situational factors, such as what is going on in the moment, maybe your financial situation, a job situation, etc., a relationship situation. But clinical anxiety it kind of covers across the board. You're always worried about everything, and it's always all the time, most of the time. You can't get anxious thoughts out of your head. So she told me this, and the minute she said it, I knew it was accurate. I wasn't about to argue with her because I had constant level anxiety, and where my anxiety comes from and how I developed generalized anxiety disorder is from untreated ADD. And some of you who may be watching may know me. I was a very good student. I was quiet, had no behavioral issues, none of the stereotypical symptoms of ADHD. But what I was forgetful. I was clumsy. I hit a lot of, I walked around the house stumbling, tripping on things, twisting my ankles, falling, spraining my wrists. I was very accident prone. I was poor at relationships, poor at communication. I had poor eye contact even when I'm on camera, and all I need to do is look at this green dot right here. I still default to my natural conversational presentation, which is to look up, look to the side, think left, think right. People who've been around me know that that's what I do, right? Which that's not typical. A lot of people do it, but that's not typical, right? But that's just something I've developed over the years because it's very difficult for me to converse with somebody and look them in their eye continuously. Even when it's not a somebody, even when it's just a green dot. I need to be looking around, moving my hands in order to focus. So some of the anxiety how this ties into anxiety is I forget a school assignment and end up getting a bad grade, which is very distressing to me. And it becomes a traumatic experience. So future experiences in which I am at risk for being late create an anxious emotion in me because I'm trying to avoid the traumatic experience again. And, trauma, that's a whole nother conversation, but trauma can be very small things depending on where you are in life and your developmental level and how big that thing is to you as an individual. So what you see is you're repeating traumatic things. For example, there was a time in my life where I was trying to get my credit good, right? And, to forget to pay a bill was huge, and created a lot of anxiety. And I hated paying bills. And then I also hated forgetting paying bills. So there's that chronic anxiety of I got to pay the bills, but then I hate to pay the bills because it makes me anxious, right? So that's how I got to where I was in my late 30s, in which I have a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. Because as a natural human, in ideal circumstances, I'm pretty calm and not really an anxiety prone person. And upon that, because I had the comorbid condition of anxiety, I was actually able to, when I started getting treated for ADHD, my anxiety level came down tremendously. And that's why I'm a strong advocate for adults getting screened for ADHD when they have symptoms of anxiety or depression. Because there were times in my life that because of situations that I was put in because of ADHD, that it did tip to depression and severe anxiety, right? So I'm a strong advocate for that. That being said, next I'm going to share with y'all um, what helped me once I became very self-aware. Um, in most things, once you become self-aware, that's the first step into fixing that thing, or at least living better with that thing, right? So once I became self-aware of myself being anxious, what I started to do specifically in the context of anxiety that I knew was related to previous life experiences that I encountered because of ADD, ADHD, was to do a little self-cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is something that you would often do with a provider, and it focuses on changes the way you think about things, changes how you approach life, shifting your mindset to a worst case scenario to a best case scenario mindset. And what I would do is, like, give you an example. If I'm, trying to get out the door and I'm super, super anxious, trying to be on time for work, I would stop, take slow, deep breaths, calm my physical, and actually have a mental process that, okay, in this situation in which my anxiety is at 100, what is the worst thing that can happen out of this situation? So in the context of being late for work is I'll be late for work. That's the worst thing, right? So, and it wouldn't be my first time, and it won't be my last time being late for work, because that's something I struggle with and I deal with. And it's not for lack of trying. So you take that moment and say, okay, what is going on in my body? My heart rate's way high. I'm starting to sweat. Is this an appropriate response for being late for work? And the answer is no. So now I'm taking those deep breaths. I'm stopping what I'm doing, closing my eyes, and thinking rational thoughts, thinking worst case scenario, but also thinking best case scenario. Best case scenario, I arrived, I'm already late. I couldn't see the clock and I don't want to, have an accident on my way to work. Best case scenario is I am late for work and nobody cares. And to be honest, in my life, the majority of the time I've been blessed to be put in situations in which the people around me have not made a big deal about it. But because of these small situations in which it was made a big deal of, I have that chronic trauma, anxiety response to that, right? So that is my experience. In addition, there was a time in my life where I had extreme anxiety and depression, and it was situational. I had a particular job at that time, and it created a lot of distress in my life. And that was my first time I ever realized I had depression. And if you look at the depression video, I share a little bit about that. But I was actually on a drug that helped with the depression and anxiety. Some of you may, you know, be familiar with Lexapro. And I was only on it 6 months, but that was enough to get me from that 99% level of anxiety back down to baseline, normal, calm Latonya. So I can actually think rationally about what's going on and approach life in a more rational point of view. And, not always running around being so worried about every little thing turning to the negative, right? And during that period of my life, the thing was that somebody else was controlling outcomes for me, right? I had very little control over anything. And because of that, I was always anxious about what this person who had the control would do to create a negative situation for me. Okay. So what I had to do is realize I don't have the control and I can't control what that person does. And me worrying about it is not going to make the situation better. Right. So I just need to make future plans to evolve myself out of the situation, which I didn't do a good job of that. Eventually the situation involved me out, which, in the moment it was a bad thing, but it ended up being a very good thing for Latonya. And I was thankful for that thing happening. Sometimes things that seem bad end up being one of the best things ever. However, sometimes you don't realize how anxious you are until it's better. So That's why I am a strong proponent of, if you feel like you're even close to that point where it's creating a severe impact on your quality of life, in particular if you have people within your charge that are going to be um, feeling your emotion, i.e., at that time I had small children. Um, it's important that you get help sooner than later. You may not need medication, you may not need therapy, but you may just need to make someone aware of your situation in the moment. Now, I'm going to talk about a few other things. Um, and then at some point, one of the co-hosts is going to join us, and that's a friend of mine and associate, Laverne. She's going to be a regular here on Mental Health Mondays. And I should mention, we're also going to be doing self-care Saturdays, which on Saturday mornings, I'm not sure what time, it'll probably be late mornings. And don't quote me on that. We're going to decide sometime this week what time we'll be coming on Saturdays. And we'll focus on that self-care element of living a healthy and balanced life. Okay. So she will be a regular host on there. She'll be popping on and joining me sometime soon. Probably within the next 5 to 10 minutes. But before then, I'm going to go over a few things that can also help when it comes to dealing with anxiety. Now, I am a big proponent of self-talk. That's what works for me. Just stopping. And I literally audibly talk to myself sometimes. And I have a way that I talk to myself in my head, and I let that verbally come out. Sometimes you need to hear the audio and not just the in your head part. You need to hear the audio too. So sometimes I'll say, now, Latonya, you need to calm down. This is not that big of a deal. You working yourself up over it is making the situation worse and not better for yourself. That's my self-talk. That's part of my self-cognitive behavioral therapy. But other things I have done before is I have actually done hypnosis. Now, I've never done hypnosis with an individual. I actually have used an app in which there's recorded audio recordings of hypnosis. And just so you'll know, one of the things that I actually believe has helped me is the hypnosis. And one of the things, this particular app, you can actually listen to what they're saying. But I started to say one of the reasons I do believe in hypnosis is because I took a class in college in which the professor actually called in. This is one of these mega classes. It was at LSU. And he called 10 random people up. And he told us, how hypnosis works, whatever. And he hypnotized them right there in front of us. And all he did was told them to close their eyes and imagine they were carrying a heavy suitcase in their right hand. And by the time he had relaxed them, gave them the verbal suggestion, all of them were tilted to the right, to that side in which they were holding the suitcase, right? And it just made me a believer in it, right? So that's something I have used for anxiety. I've used it for ADHD. Probably have not used it as a tool enough, but some people may be a little bit leery of hypnosis. I would say try it on one of these apps because you can listen to the audio recording before you actually use it in a hypnotic state. And all a hypnotic state is, you get very calm, relaxed, and you just make yourself relax. That's all it is. It's nothing really fancy. But if you're a little bit concerned, you can always listen to the audio in full before you actually do it in a relaxed hypnotic state. So that's one thing that I have used that I do believe that works. Another one that people use without even knowing they're using it is art and music therapy. We all have that thing that we do creatively, not necessarily art. It could be arts and crafts. It could be music. It could be actually performing music that actually calms our spirit, right? So that is one thing that I have used is music. Particularly gospel music helps me when I'm anxious. I have my little favorite playlist in which I can just kind of calm down, relaxed, and feel better. Another huge one that I'm a proponent of is exercise. Now, this is one that I don't use enough. I actually just bought me a new rowing machine that I have not used enough as of yet. But what exercise does, and it's particularly beneficial in those who have some kind of neurodivergence in which they already have a neurotransmitter deficiency. But in general, it's good for everybody. And what it does is, we all have heard that it releases endorphins. What those endorphins are neurotransmitters. So a lot of times when we're anxious, the reason we cannot calm down is because our brain is for some reason deficient in the neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine, that tell us it's going to be okay, right? So in many disease processes, when you have a deficiency in dopamine, dopamine is the it's going to be all right drug, right? It's going to be all right neurotransmitter. So you don't have an opportunity to actually, your brain is not releasing it. So you cannot calm down. You literally physically don't have what you need in your body to bring you back to baseline. So what exercise does is it causes an excess release of that, right? And so that's something that anybody can use. And it doesn't take much. It often doesn't take much. Obviously, you want to get your heart rate up to a certain level, but it doesn't take much. You don't have to be running around track. A vigorous walk, even like a few minutes of jumping jacks past a certain point. And you got to kind of push past that point of, ooh, I'm tired. And that's where the endorphins are released. So you got to push yourself a little bit to get the endorphins to release in your brain. And that's just the body's response to, oh, we're doing a little extra. Let's release the endorphin. So that's why you have to push your body just a little bit in order to get that endorphin release. But I am a strong proponent of any kind of exercise that gets your heart rate up to deal with anxiety. And a lot of times for some people, it's kind of weird because a lot of times when they have high levels of anxiety, their heart rate is already up. But you just want to be cautious. If your heart rate's up so high that you're at the level of possibly a panic attack, you do not want to go hit the track, right? Give yourself an opportunity to calm down a little bit. Maybe like Bettina says, she just made a comment, using the music and the exercise to relax yourself first. Get yourself calmed down. A lot of people do yoga or meditation before they exercise to calm their body before they exercise. So use another tool if you're going into the physical activity already anxious. Use another tool. So that's one thing I have used is music on the way to exercise. I used to, like when I used to go to the gym, I would listen to like hype music to get me like pumped up to exercise because I was not motivated. Music will be a motivator, but at the same time as you're getting motivated and you're feeling happy, the dopamine is released, right? Bettina gave another good suggestion. This is excellent. And this kind of goes into art therapy too, because art therapy can not only be making art, but it can also be looking at art, looking at things that you find pleasing to your eye. And she suggested that some people say that watching fish in an aquarium helps them. And I would tend to agree with that. There's something about watching the fish, go back and forth, that repetitive motion that does release dopamine in your brain. And just to tie it in with the physiological, some people will notice that some people with autism have tics, or they rock, or they have repetitive features. That is the same type of thing that is releasing dopamine, except they're physically doing it as opposed to looking at someone else doing it. But yeah, that repetitive swimming back and forth is calming. Also, the thought of the fish having no care. All they have to do in life is just swim around that aquarium and they find peace in it, right? And, sometimes seeing other people have peace, or other animals, right? And that takes me into the next one, is pet therapy. Having a pet can sometimes calm you. But being calmed by other people around you, the people around you is important. That's a therapy as well. But being around animals can actually help you as far as providing a therapeutic response to the animal in the situation. We actually have a pet in our house, and it's very therapeutic for everybody in our house. We actually have a house full of people with ADHD. I have three boys, and sometimes we get hyped up. We all hyped up. Mama's hyped up, the boys hyped up, or whatever. And our dog is half German Shepherd, half Lab, and he actually brings a calming effect because he's sleepy and he just always wants to get pet, and he doesn't have a worry. He's never hyped, so he'll come by you, and he'll demand the pets, and you start petting him in a repetitive fashion, and it brings a calm to you as well. So pets are an excellent therapeutic um, tool when it comes to managing anxiety. So let's see, what do we have next on this list? So when it comes to keeping your body healthy, when you want to manage, one thing that you need to do um, to manage anxiety is, hold on, yeah. I'm texting our co-host. She's having technical difficulties. Um, so living a healthy lifestyle is important because I just talked about the neurotransmitters that tell you everything's going to be fine and they calm you down. In order to have those release, um, you have to have a balanced diet. You have to have the tools or the building blocks to build those neurotransmitters, right? So healthy diet, that goes without saying, healthy balanced diet. But also another big component is sleeping. And sleeping is such a very individual oriented type thing because some of us don't need as much sleep as others, right? So one of the challenges of sleeping is actually finding how much is needed. And sometimes that's going to wax and wane depending on what we're doing in life, right? So finding how much we need and consistently getting that amount of sleep is a big deal. But then also, what if you're anxious and you're trying to go to sleep and you're having difficulty sleeping? So that's another layer that kind of complicates things when you're already anxious, is actually finding a way to get to sleep. Okay. So for a minute, I'm going to talk about things you can do to have healthy sleep. And there was a time in my life where I started having seizure-like activities, kind of twitches and shaking and tremors in my life. And what it did boil down to, the neurologist at the time, they never did fully put their finger on it. I know what it is now because I ended up getting a diagnosis of autoimmune disease, but at that time I had no clue. But one of the things she talked to me about, my neurologist, was getting adequate sleep, and she actually sent me to a sleep doctor to make sure I didn't have sleep apnea, which I don't. But he talked to me about a tool called sleep hygiene, and that's in which you keep your sleep clean, and clean by you have a clean routine that you repeat all the time, and you don't deviate for that routine. You keep it clean, just like you have a hygiene routine in which you brush your teeth, every morning after every meal or whatever. That's a hygiene routine. There's a sleep hygiene routine. And some of the tips he gave me, which I found very beneficial, is the only thing you should do in the place you sleep is sleep. So if you have a bed, that's the only thing you're going to do in the bed. You're not going to read in the bed. You're not going to study in the bed. You're not going to do work on your laptop in the bed. You only sleep in the bed. And it trains your brain to sleep when you lie down. When you get in that bed, your brain is like, oh, this is the place we sleep. So I guess it's time to go to sleep. And it's easier for you to go to sleep. The second thing he said to avoid, and we all know this, is electronics. Electronics produce a light that goes to our brain and arouses us. It's an arousal. It releases hormones to arouse us. So we need to avoid those lights in order to actually, hold on, y'all, let me send this. All righty. Hey. Our co-host is going to be joining us in just a sec, y'all. Let me pull her up. Hello. Hi, Laverne.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hey, y'all. How are
This is
you,
Laverne Wright.
Latonya?
She's going to be a co-host here on Mental Health Mondays. And I was talking about sleep, Laverne, but I'm going to take a moment to allow you a time to introduce yourself
Okay.
in whatever way you see fit. And then we'll
Okay.
continue talking about sleep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Laverne Scott Bright. I'm a registered nurse and a clinical educator, also a healthcare advocate. So you'll see me a lot with Latonya. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Latonya.
Well, thank you for being here and thank you for agreeing to be a co-host of Mental Health
Yes.
Mondays. As much as I like to talk and talk all the time, um, I'm not very, I'm sure all these people would appreciate having different point of views and
Awesome.
different levels of wisdom from different backgrounds in order to also learn and grow from. So I 100% appreciate you agreeing to do this. I know when I
Awesome.
asked you this, you probably weren't expecting that, but you stepped up to the challenge, and I'm so happy to have you with
Okay.
us. So I was talking about maintaining healthy sleep habits in order to um, ensure that you're not anxious and to manage anxiety. Um, and I was actually talking about the lighting and having light in your
Yeah,
eyes before
sleep
you go to
hygiene is
bed.
very important. Yeah.
Yes. I actually keep my phone on warm mode in order just because I use my devices so much, my computer,
Right.
my phone, my
Right.
tablet. So I keep everything on warm mode. So that is a tip is just to keep your iPhone on warm mode. And
Yeah.
people, when they look at my phone, they're like, "What's wrong with your phone?" And I
Right.
forget that it's actually in warm mode
Warm mode.
sometimes because
Yeah.
I'm used to it. But to some
Yeah.
people, it can look very weird at first, but you get
Yeah.
used to it very quickly.
And even for those that may can actually have that device outside of the room, I
Hmm.
know our iPhones are glued to us, but even if you, because I have to pretty much put that device. I have not a television in my room, not in my bedroom, but but just remove those out of the bedroom. That would help a lot because you're always drawn to look at, that's the first thing you look at when you go to the bathroom
Hmm.
is your cell phone. So, and that
Hmm.
can delay your sleep a lot. So I think that's a
Absolutely.
good thing.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing he said is like try to go to sleep at the same time every day. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, when we talk about personal development, we talk about having routines and systems and habits. And that's one thing that helps your body fall into line is if you do the same thing with it every day, right? So
Right.
if you're going to sleep at the same time every day, it doesn't matter what you're doing at that time. If that's your usual bedtime, your body's going to start calming. And a lot of times what I find is I try to keep a regular sleep routine, which it usually doesn't work, but when I do start to get in that regular sleep routine, I will be doing something, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I will feel the sleep come on me, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so that is a good thing because it's that your body is being obedient to your routine. Um,
Exactly. And there's some good apps for that, that'll
yes.
remind you to wind down, you know, to prepare for sleep.
I know I'm not sure about the Android platform, but I actually have that on my iPhone, in which it has a little app that helps you sleep and have better
Mm-hmm.
sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it, at a
Yeah.
certain time, it'll say start winding down. Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
Usually that's not the time I start winding down, but it's always a trigger that, hey, it's a lot later than you think. Because with
Right.
ADHD comes time blindness, and you don't
Nice.
realize that so much
Exactly.
time has elapsed a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But one piece of technology that can help with sleep is also white noise. I know a lot of people do use that to help them. So you can actually start the white noise before you get in the bed to start
Yeah.
triggering your brain to get sleepy. So if you're hyped up,
Mm-hmm.
you've been doing something and you're getting ready for bed, just, you're brushing your teeth, taking a shower, start the white noise early
Yeah.
so you can start getting your brain in the mode of going to sleep.
And Latonya, kind of explain what white noise is, to those who may not
So
know, because it can be different things for
it
different
can
people.
be. It can be. There's certain frequencies that are producing white noise that trigger processes in your brain that actually release certain neurotransmitters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So white noise is one of those things. I'm a car sleeper. And one of the reasons I believe I've always been a car sleeper is because of that consistent noise of the motor produces
Mhm.
enough dopamine in my brain to calm me down and sleep. I've always been a car sleeper. That's one thing that I was known for in my family. Like, you put me in the car, it doesn't take long and I'm asleep. Um,
Mhm.
so that is one thing that actually does that as well. Because we just talked a little bit
Yeah.
ago about, music therapy for anxiety.
Right.
You can also have, and that's how it's working by releasing the appropriate transmitters. White noise can produce the appropriate neurotransmitters to help you sleep.
Sleep.
Now,
Yeah.
sometimes
Pro-
over time, if you work around white noise, you can develop an immunity to it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but one thing that can help you to get back in it is to, even though it's not helping you go to sleep, still listen to it while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
And it'll train your brain. Your brain, y'all, is very easy to trick and train.
Right.
So if you start listening to certain things every day, just like when I said earlier, getting in the bed and only doing sleeping in the bed tricks your brain to, oh, I'm in the bed,
Mhm.
it's time to go sleep. Listening to that sound will trick your brain
Yeah.
into eventually knowing that it's sleep time and
Yeah. And giving you a
shutting down.
calmness. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like it, like to me, I use a roaring fan. A roaring
Mm-hmm.
fan is my white noise, and I've known people to have rain on a tin roof. I think it's like
Mm-hmm.
a sound that you can
Mm-hmm.
download to play in your room. Rain on a tin roof or like a ocean
Yes,
noise, or those are considered like white noise. Is calming, and I know it usually helps a lot of babies. If you have,
it does.
a crying baby that can't calm down at night, that white noise, or even just turning that TV on to the static of white noise. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those are
Yeah.
some good ways to.
Um, YouTube actually has, I have like a Roku TV, and on YouTube there's a particular sound loop, and it's like 8 hours, and it's called
Oh,
Dark Screen Rain,
okay,
and it's the
okay.
sound of rain,
Oh
and it's just the
yeah.
right level for me. Sometimes you
Mhm.
gotta find what's good for you.
Right.
And it's called dark screen rain. And what it is the screen is dark, so you don't have to worry about those white lights hitting
Lights.
you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even when your eyes are closed, sometimes the light hitting you is enough to
Mhm.
stimulate
Right.
you, right?
Right.
But it's dark screen rain. It's just a black screen with the sound of rain.
Oh,
And when
that's
I tell
cool.
you, I will sleep through the alarm with that. Sometimes I have to be careful to like fast forward it to a certain
Right.
point to where I know, okay,
Uh-huh.
I got 6 hours to sleep, so I'm gonna fast forward it to 5 hours because if that rain is going off at the same time as my alarm, I
Uh-huh.
may sleep through my alarm or just
And
like
what's
wake up and turn
what's
it
the
off.
name of it again? Dark Screen Rain.
Dark Screen Rains.
Okay.
SCREEN. Dark
Okay.
Screen
I
Rain.
might have to try
Yeah.
that for my
Try it out.
grandchild.
I strongly
Okay.
suggest anybody with sleep issues try
Yeah.
it out. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry I missed you. I'm glad we answered Bettina's question. And white noise can be anything that's a continuous frequency or pattern. And because white noise can vary in frequency, you may find certain white noises, as we said, more appealing than others. So
Right.
sometimes you do have to find the one that works well for you.
Mhm.
I typically gravitate towards watery sounds as opposed to airy type sounds. Airy
Mhm.
type sounds kind of like some people like wind sounds. It kind of has opposite effect on me.
Yeah.
Um, so Laverne, I kind of shared
Yes.
my experience earlier with
Okay.
anxiety. Would
Okay.
you like to share your experience with anxiety and say what helps you or has helped you in the past?
Sure. Okay. Well, anxiety, it presents to me kind of different than maybe others. What I tend to do, I'm going to talk about what I tend to do, and I'm going to talk about a recent experience of anxiety. Um, I tend to start to overeat. I tend to knick-knack. Sweets is my thing. If I know I got something coming up that's going to give me anxiety, I start overeating. I start fidgeting, rambling speech. It's just like my mind cannot focus, cannot think clearly. Just coming up to that event, I have anxiety. Um, one situation I can tell you about and is my anxiety for public speaking, is how Latonya talked me into being a co-host, and I'm facing my fears. And I found that the more you do it, the better you get. The more you do it, the anxiety alleviates. But a couple of things that I did find what helps with anxiety is planning and preparation. Those some things that I help, and I'm a very spiritual person, so talking to the Heavenly Father is my number one way. I go into my prayer room, I quiet myself down, and I just talk to God about my fear, I put it all out on the line. And even to the point to where I start journaling, like, I journal my prayers. That helps me a lot. But that's helped also. What has really been a big help is meditation. And I know in Christianity, we kind of veer away from meditation, but it's more of like contemplative prayer. Like I focus on scriptures on who God says I am, and I repeat them over and over in my head. I'm breathing in and breathing out while I'm calming myself for, a good 5 minutes. Even, before you go in to do an event, before you go into an interview, before you go into anything that you may have anxiety, take 5 minutes out and just do some breathing exercises. And, do affirmations. Another thing, if you I
Absolutely.
believe am God who says I am who God says I am. I repeat it to myself. I look myself in the mirror, that self talk in the
Hmm.
mirror saying, reciting over and over who God says you are. So I found that those
Hmm.
things help me with anxiety. And um, I have a really good book that I've read on contemplative prayer. If I can put that in the chat also. For those of you all who may not know what contemplative prayer is, but it's similar to a form of meditation, but your meditation is you're clearing your mind of everything, whereas
Hmm.
contemplative prayer you're focusing and you're meditating on God's word. You know.
Yes, awesome, awesome. Prayer has been a huge thing for me as well, especially early on in my mental health journey. And that stigma behind mental health is so strong, and it keeps so
It
many
is.
people from living their best life. And
Right.
you know,
Mental health is an illness, just like
yes.
any other illness that anyone may
Hmm.
have. If you're having a heart attack and you're going to the hospital, for heart issues, or you're seeing a cardiologist, same
Hmm.
thing with mental health, you're
Yes,
seeing a
yes.
psychiatrist. So
And
it's very important.
prayer is a huge factor, and it can be a very helpful factor, but we cannot neglect that the fact that God provided other resources
Exactly.
for us to get help, and that
Right.
is seeing a mental health provider and possibly even taking a medicine. Those people
Exactly.
came up with those medicines from divine inspiration, in my opinion. Because they have saved
Exactly.
many lives.
Right.
So if you're hungry, you're not going to pray for food, right? You're going to walk in the kitchen and make you something to eat, right?
Yes, exactly.
So if you're struggling with a mental health problem, sure, definitely pray. But there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about how faith without works is dead.
That
If
exactly.
you can have faith that the Lord is going to help you, but you got to start moving too. You got to
You
start
gotta
working
start
and
moving. You
working on
gotta
that thing as well,
exactly.
and just start moving. And some of the tools we talked about today are the tools that you can use to start working, right? And
Exactly.
getting to where you need to be. And often what we find in general and in anything in life is when you start moving, you start finding what you need, right?
Need exactly.
When you start moving, those resources come forward.
Yeah.
And sometimes the move is to see a mental health provider. Sometimes the the move is to talk to someone.
Right.
But if you believe in a higher power, you can always find peace in prayer.
Exactly.
you know
Exactly.
Sometimes it's not instantaneously, sometimes it's in the practice of it. But I am a strong believer, and so is Laverne. But we also believe that faith without works is dead. So
Exactly.
prayer, before I realized what I was struggling with was mental health issues, was a huge thing that kept me going when I didn't know better or didn't know what else to do. Um, and also, like she said, self talk, positive affirmations, that sort of thing.
Right. And just getting it out there, just talking
Hmm.
to people, because that's another trick of the enemy for us to be afraid or ashamed to
Hmm.
say what's going on with us. And that's a trick of the enemy. So once you get to moving, just like prayer
Hmm.
without works is dead, you got to get out there and you got to seek help. You got to talk to
Hmm.
people.
Hmm. Absolutely. And being open to when people tell you things, when you're vulnerable with people and they give you feedback, and you'll know
Right.
if it's valid feedback or not, because there are
Hmm.
people you're going to be vulnerable with who are going to take advantage of us, right, and use it to hurt us.
Right.
Um, Discard those people. But when you're really being vulnerable with somebody and sharing what's going on with you, and they give you feedback, they give you wisdom. You take it and you run with it. You take it when you run with it. Because if you are looking for help and you're at the point where you need help, that is help when somebody's giving you
Mhm.
wisdom. So you take it and
Right.
run with it. And if you need help
Right.
running with it, tell them you need help running with it, right? I'm the type that,
Exactly.
you can't make that doctor's appointment. Okay, who is your doctor? Give me your little information. I'm about to call myself, because you are
Right.
struggling with this thing, right? You're
Exactly.
struggling taking that first step, and I can hold your hand and take the first step with you.
Right.
And that's one thing that a coach can do as well, as far as struggling. And as we get ready to close up, first off, I'm going to open the floor to questions. If anybody is on that has a question, um, feel free to put it in the comments and we could talk about that thing. But also, if you're watching on the replay, we will be monitoring the comments section of the replays. And you know, feel free to ask anything you want. If you need resources, um, let us know what your needs are. That's what we're here for. This is our mission in life, is to help people. So
Right.
feel free to put comments in the comments section.
And
Also, you can make an appointment with me at alwaysupcoaching.com. Everybody gets a free hour. If you're struggling in some kind of way and you don't think it's at the point where you need to go to a mental health provider, but you do feel like you need to be proactive in doing something, make an appointment with me. If I can't help you, I will ensure that you find somebody who can.
right.
So my calendar is has always has slots available that we can speak for an hour, and I can either help you myself or get you pointed in the direction of finding help. So alwaysupcoaching.com to book a free discovery call.
Awesome.
So any final words, Laverne, before we close it out?
No, I don't know if you covered just a few other things, thoughts I was sitting here thinking about with anxiety.
Mhm.
It's good that you guard your spirit, guard your heart, stay away
Yeah.
from the negativity.
Hmm.
You may have negative people that you're around, negative
Hmm.
music, negative even the news can
Hmm.
have like a lot of negativity in it that can,
So,
affect
Laverne, we
your
got a
mental
question
health.
that ties into just what you said, negative
Oh,
people.
mm-hmm.
But Tina is asking, how do you discard those people who take advantage when you are open? My answer would be, I don't think you necessarily need to discard them. I do think you need to create a boundary, however, with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Once they show you
Mm-hmm.
who they are, you create a healthy
Mm-hmm.
boundary as far as your level of communication and what you share with that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, first of all, if you're realizing they're taking advantage of you, reel that back and say that, I am important. I am important to other people, and that someone taking advantage of me is not a healthy thing, right? And
Right.
it will lead to very bad things in the long run if I let people take advantage of me, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
gird yourself with that strength to cut that person off in that
Exactly.
situation in which they're trying to take advantage of you. But
Exactly.
I am not a discarder of people. I think, people come into our lives for certain reasons and certain seasons,
Right.
and you don't have to completely throw them away, because guess what? The season may come around where that person comes back for a reason, and the reason may be a benefit to you. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, we can create boundaries, healthy
Right.
boundaries, in
Healthy
which
boundaries.
certain
Exactly.
people are not involved in certain levels of our
Mm-hmm.
life. Do you have anything to tack on that, Laverne?
You choose your friends wisely. My circle's not very big. Um, I confide, like Latonya said, you have different people for different seasons. Like I'm not gonna, Latonya, and I'm not trying to offend you, Latonya, but I know you're not married, but I have
Mm-hmm.
married friends, so I know if I'm having issues with my marriage, I have a friend that I know, she's going, she
Hmm.
has a good marriage, she's setting that example. That's who I'm gonna go and confide in, and I respect her opinions on, because
Hmm.
she may have been through something that I may have
Hmm.
not been to, and then she may have a perspective that I may have not thought about. So different people for different seasons in your life. So if you have a friend and you just sit back and you're with that friend, look just how they operate. You know your friends better than, a lot of times better than they know themselves. So I would say, ask God for discernment, when you're sharing certain issues, and if that friend is talking about this other person's business,
Mm,
well, they're going to talk about your business. So just
exactly.
use that spirit of discernment, and look
Yes.
at their life, because a lot of times people can preach the word and say the word, but if it goes to how they're living, if they're
Hmm.
setting an example on how they're living, you would know.
Yes. Yes. Um, to kind of piggyback where you're talking about going to a friend who's married, whatever. Like, I go to people and vent and ask questions and see what people's thought processes are on certain things. And, for example, if it's a parenting issue, I go to someone who I value their parenting opinion and who
Exactly,
has shown
exactly.
themselves to be a responsible parent
Responsible
and
parent,
who
right?
has been
Exactly,
transparent with me about how they parent. And
right,
that's a
exactly.
good gauge of being vulnerable with somebody who's been willing to be vulnerable with you
With you,
is
right?
typically a good person to be vulnerable with.
With
All right,
exactly.
they're sharing their business and they're sharing their struggles and their successes, their
Mhm,
struggles and their
mhm.
successes. Very often people only
Yeah,
want to share the successes, right?
successes. Yeah,
They're
exactly,
sharing their struggles and successes. Those are the people you want to come to, because
exactly,
even if they don't have the help for you, they value you being successful and overcoming the situation. And they may have some wise words that can guide you in the right direction. And they're not
exactly.
going to think less of you because you're struggling.
Struggling. Yeah, because a lot of times they've been there too. So
Hmm.
you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're going to close it out. We'll see y'all next week. I don't know yet what we're going to talk about next week. Since this
I'm
is a new
excited,
series,
y'all.
what I'm going to ask you to do is, if there's a specific topic in mental health that you want to see sooner than later, comment in the comment section so we can put it near the top of the list or at the top of the list, because we want to ensure everybody gets something out of what we're providing. Um, as a reminder, you can always go to alwaysupcoaching.com. Make sure you follow me at Always Up Coaching, my coaching page, and Always Up Coaching. And I'm going to put the links after the broadcast in the comment section. So if you want to come back later, if you're watching a replay, just click those links and follow, because a lot of you probably are listening from my personal page, and I will not always continue to broadcast this series on my personal page. But anyway, y'all have a great week. We will see y'all for Self Care Saturday. Um, Sometime Saturday. I will schedule the event as soon as we nail down the time, and we hope to see you there as well. Thank you
All
for
right.
being here, Laverne.
Thank y'all.
And
Thank
at
you,
our
Latonya.
inaugural Mental Health Monday, I'm so excited what the future holds
Awesome.
for this. And